My husband threw me down the stairs from the second floor after beating me for 3 hours straight. 2 days later, I woke up in the hospital with 6 broken ribs and a face so swollen I could barely open my eyes. That's when I found out he had run off with my neighbor, the one who used to wave and smile at me every morning. My name is Nora Ellison, but most people call me Miss Nora. I'm 70 years old, born and raised in a small mining town called Elkmont, West Virginia. But I've lived in Cincinnati, Ohio for nearly 4 decades. I came to this city to tell a story I've kept locked away for years, one of heartbreak survival and quiet resilience. I was born in 1954 in a modest wooden house on the edge of Elkmont. My father, George Ellison, worked long shifts in the coal mines. Each day, he'd return home, coated in black dust, his hair and eyebrows nearly white with it. I thought he looked like a snowman. My mother, Hazel, did laundry for neighbors and baked cornbread that smelled like heaven. Though we had very little, I never felt poor. The house had just 2 small bedrooms, one for my parents and one shared between me and my 2 younger brothers. The warmth of the stove, the orchard out back, and the sound of Elvis on the radio shaped the background of my earliest years. My mom used to say, "Nora, if a man doesn't look at you the way your daddy looks at me, keep walking." And she was right. My father always came home, kissed her forehead, and asked about her day, even when he could barely breathe from the coal dust. I grew up thinking love looked like that, gentle, loyal, and kind. The schoolhouse was a full hour's walk, but I loved every step. I was determined to become a teacher. Books were my best friends, and my father, despite having little formal education, used to say, "Learn everything you can, sweetheart. No one can steal that from you." I graduated teacher college in 1973, the first in my family. My father cried quietly at the ceremony. Soon after, I began teaching at a rural school for kids aged 6 to 9. It was during that time that I met Daniel Price. He was the grandfather of one of my students. Tall, neat, with a soft southern voice and a tidy mustache, Daniel wore pressed slacks and buttoned shirts, simple but proud. "You must be the teacher," he said one afternoon, his eyes making me blush. I nodded. "I'm Nora Ellison. Welcome." He smiled, extending a hand. "Daniel Price. My grandson talks about you non-stop." Daniel came by often after school. Each time he had something kind to say. "Miss Nora, you light up when you teach." Every word fed my dreams. I was young, sheltered, and I fell hard. Daniel invited me out for a milkshake one afternoon. I was nervous. I'd never been alone with a man, but I said yes. My mother warned me gently, "Pretty men know they're pretty. Be careful." But Daniel was a gentleman, never even tried to touch my hand. He was a natural storyteller, clever and charismatic. He worked at a local appliance store, and he dreamed of opening his own shop one day. "I want to build something that makes people's lives easier," he said, looking straight at me, "especially for the woman I'll marry." Our relationship moved slowly and respectfully. He helped my mom with groceries, laughed with my brothers, and never raised his voice. Even my father, usually reserved with strangers, nodded approvingly. "He seemed steady," he said. "But remember, a man's good side. Don't cancel out the parts you don't see." I wish I'd listened closer. In January 1974, we got married at Gracewood Baptist Church. I was 20. Daniel was 27. My mother sewed my dress by hand. Walking down the aisle on my father's arm, I thought I'd found forever. We spent our honeymoon in a rented cabin near Lake Norris, simple but beautiful. Daniel was tender at first, but just 2 days and his tone changed. My wife should know how to keep a man happy, he muttered one night, pushing boundaries I wasn't ready for. I gave in, confused, believing it was part of marriage. Back home in Elkmont, our life settled into routine cooking, working, adjusting. I was teaching full-time. Daniel's income was steady, but slowly the charm faded. He criticized my meals. He questioned my conversations. That skirt's too short for a married woman, he snapped one Sunday. He grew jealous of the elderly janitor at my school. When I got pregnant, I was thrilled. I dreamed of motherhood, of reading bedtime stories to a child of my own. Daniel promised he'd be the best father. But when I miscarried 3 months in, he turned cold like a door had slammed shut. "You must have done something wrong," he said flatly. I cried alone in the bathroom, trying to pretend it wasn't the start of something darker. But it was. The next year, I became pregnant again. I followed every rule. Daniel seemed happy. He brought me tea, talked to my belly. For a moment, I believed we were okay. At 5 months, I lost the baby. This time, I'd already felt it move. I'd bought a tiny pair of socks. The grief was unbearable. Daniel didn't console me. He exploded. "What's wrong with you?" he shouted on the drive home. "Other women don't lose babies." I raised my voice. He slapped me across the face. "I'm your husband," he growled. "Don't ever talk back to me." I wanted to run, but shame and fear kept me still. What would my family think if I left? By year 3, Daniel lost his job. Rumors said it was over missing cash. My salary barely covered food. He started drinking first beer, then whiskey by breakfast. His insults became slaps. Slaps became punches. I lied about the bruises I tripped on the porch. My parents asked questions, but I denied everything. Our neighbor Janice McCall, a divorced woman, noticed. She brought cookies, asked quiet questions. "You can leave, Nora," she whispered once. "You don't deserve this." Daniel hated her, called her names. I defended her, not knowing they were getting closer behind my back. One afternoon, I found a matchbook from a bar we'd never been to. His shirt smelled like perfume. "It was a woman on the bus," he said casually. I didn't believe him, but I didn't want the truth either. Then came June 6, 1977. A pipe burst at school and I came home early. The house was quiet until I heard Janice laughing in my bedroom. My knees buckled. I peeked in. There they were, my husband, my friend, in our bed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just turned around and walked to the kitchen. When he came out whistling, he froze at the sight of me. "What are you doing home?" "Water leak. School closed early." He knew I knew. "You saw something." "I saw everything." He smirked. "So what, you're not going anywhere?" "I am," I said. "It's over." His smile vanished. "You leave when I say you leave." He lunged, slapped me, punched me, dragged me by the hair. "Janice is a real woman, not cold like you. You're useless. You can't even give me a child." I curled into myself, praying for it to end. When it did, I crawled to the phone. My face didn't look like mine anymore. One eye swollen shut, lips split, bruises blooming across my ribs like ink in water. That morning, Janice was gone. Daniel had left to slamming the door behind him and barking, "Have dinner ready when I get back." I didn't wait. With trembling fingers, I called the only person I trusted, my older sister, Marilyn Parker. "Marilyn, help me. Daniel, he hurt me bad." She and her husband, Walter, arrived within half an hour. Walter's hands clenched into fists when he saw me. "We're going to the hospital," he said. "No," I whispered. "He'll find me there." Instead, they took me to their home, a 2-bedroom duplex on the edge of town. Marilyn cleaned my wounds gently, tears in her eyes. "How long has this been happening?" "Nora." The words came out of me like a confession I'd rehearsed in my sleep. The miscarriages, the hitting, the betrayal. "Why didn't you leave?" she asked softly. "I thought I could fix him." Walter shook his head. "No man like that ever gets better. Not without breaking you first." The next day, bruised but resolute, Marilyn convinced me to report him. At the local sheriff's office, the deputy barely looked up. "You want to press charges could ruin his reputation." "I'm not worried about his reputation," I said, surprising even myself. A medical report confirmed what my body already knew: 2 cracked ribs, 1 fractured head trauma, a gash above my eyebrow, bruises on my backside hip, and a contusion on my kidney. The doctor looked me in the eye and said quietly, "If you go back to that house, he will kill you." So I stayed with Marilyn and Walter. I didn't sleep. I barely ate, but I was alive. 3 days later, Walter came in from work with news. "He's gone." Gone. Daniel cleaned out his locker, took a suitcase, and vanished. Janice is gone too. No one's seen either of them since Friday. The owner of the hardware store came by the next day. "Your husband took tool supplies, even cement and lime," he said, frowning. "Said he had a side project." I froze. Cement, lime, and blood on the bed sheets I tried not to see. A week later, my parents arrived from Elkmont. My father, Grayer, now stood in the doorway and whispered, "Why didn't you tell us?" "I didn't want to disappoint you." He shook his head, tears rolling down his cheeks. "You could never disappoint me." I took a leave from school. My principal assured me my job would be waiting. I returned to the tiny bedroom I'd grown up in, now filled with shadows I couldn't name. 1 month passed, then came the knock. 2 detectives, a yellow notepad. "Miss Ellison, one said we've located your husband." He didn't need to say more. My legs gave out. They took me to a rental property on the outskirts of town. Police tape fluttered in the wind. Flashing lights, a stretcher. Janice's body was found beneath a concrete slab, beaten, wrapped in a plastic tarp, buried in lime. Daniel tried to flee. He was armed. A standoff followed. He was shot, killed on the scene. The paper screamed murder-suicide plan uncovered. My name was in every headline. My wedding photos plastered beside crime scene tape. I was no longer a teacher. I was the widow of a killer. Parents pulled their kids from my class. The school board asked me to resign quietly. Neighbors stopped talking to me in the store. At night, I stared at the ceiling, asking the same question again and again. Could I have saved her? My mother tried to convince me otherwise. That wasn't your fault, baby. But I didn't believe her. Not yet. I was floating through the days, barely present, when my father did something unexpected. One Sunday morning in late September 1977, he walked into my room holding 2 bus tickets. Cincinnati, he said. We're leaving tomorrow. Why? I asked hoarse. Because there's nothing left for you here, except eyes that don't see you and whispers you don't deserve. And because I want my daughter back. I was 24, widowed by violence, broken in every way. But something in my father's voice pulled me up from the bed. The next morning, we boarded a Greyhound bus as the Appalachian Hills faded behind us. 12 hours of silence of highway gas stations and strangers' conversations. Somewhere past Lexington, I leaned my head against the window and saw my reflection, barely me anymore. But as we crossed the Ohio River, my father said, "Look at that Nora. Ain't that something?" The skyline of Cincinnati shimmered in the distance, sunlight bouncing off glass and river. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to hope. We stayed in a cheap motel near downtown for the first few days. My father, practical as ever, found work moving cargo at the river port. Soon after, we rented a small walk-up apartment in Over the Rhine. The walls thin, the floors creaky, but it was ours. I was still a ghost. I moved through the city like someone hiding in plain sight. I didn't talk much, didn't eat much, but Cincinnati gave me something Elkmont never could: anonymity. No one here knew my past. The sparkle of the Ohio River outside my window became my quiet companion. It glistened each morning like a reminder that life kept moving even if I didn't. My dad would take me for walks along the riverbank in the evenings. He'd say nothing for long stretches, then offer simple truths. You're still breathing. That means something. Or, you don't have to tell anyone your story, but don't forget it. One crisp October afternoon, we stopped at a small street fair near Findlay Market. That's where I met Bea Thompson. She ran a little ice cream cart, the kind with a striped umbrella and a faded bell. Her laugh was big. Her hair was salt and pepper pulled back with a red bandana. She handed my dad a vanilla cone, then turned to me. "You look like someone who's carrying the whole world on her back," she said, handing me a funnel cake. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I just stared at the powdered sugar melting on my fingers. Bea didn't flinch. She touched my wrist gently and said, "It's okay, honey. Let it out." I cried for an hour on a park bench in front of a woman I'd never met. She listened, not like someone who wanted details, but like someone who had her own. When I finally stopped, I whispered, "He tried to kill me," and she died. Bea just nodded, and yet here you are, still here, which means something. She offered me work, small jobs at her family's diner near the market. Dishes, tables, nothing fancy. I hesitated. My dad met Bea and her husband Howard, a quiet man with kind eyes, and gave me a quiet nod. "You should try." So in January 1978, I became a dishwasher at Thompson's Cafe. I wore secondhand shoes and kept my head down. The clanging plates and shouting cooks made my nerves hum. But B would pat my back and say little by little. And little by little, I did. That spring, my mother joined us in Cincinnati. With her embroidery, her flower pots, and her peanut butter pie recipe, she filled our tiny 2-room apartment with something I hadn't felt in years: home. She looked around and said, "This city breathes easier than back home." She was right. I smiled more, slept better, walked without looking over my shoulder. And for the first time, I began to believe in the possibility of something new. Findlay Market had its rhythm. Street musicians, flower vendors, the smell of fried dough and spices. In the back alley behind Thompson's Cafe, crates of vegetables piled high. Fishermen yelled out prices while kids darted between stalls sticky from melting popsicles. That's where I saw them, those kids. Some of them ran wild. Others just stood there, wide-eyed and quiet. One boy was trying to read a torn cereal box. Another traced letters with his finger in the dirt. I saw myself in their faces. Or maybe I saw what I used to be: curious, eager, and invisible. One day, I sat by a crate and asked, "Do you want to learn to write your name?" They hesitated, so I wrote mine first. Nora. 3 letters in one girl smiled. "That's pretty." I smiled back. "Yours can be too." After work, I started gathering scraps. Cardboard boxes, broken pencils, charcoal from the back grill. We used crates as desks, sidewalk chalk for letters, laughter for fuel. One of the older boys squinted at me. "Are you a real teacher?" I looked at the dusty sidewalk, at the makeshift classroom I'd built under the old market awning. "I was," I said. "Life took it away." He frowned. "Can't you get it back?" That question stayed with me all night. Could I? The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my parents and told them I want to go back to school, to teach again officially. My father didn't hesitate. He reached across the table, took my hand, and said, "Then let's make it happen." So I worked at B's by day and studied at night. I enrolled in a bridge program at the University of Cincinnati. Not easy, not fast. But I was 26, and for the first time since I was a girl in Elkmont, I felt like I was building something. That fall, I passed the education program's entrance exam, ranked in the top 25 out of nearly 300. College reopened a world I'd almost forgotten: child psychology, learning theory, John Dewey, Montessori, scaffolding, phonics, and the belief that teaching was about more than just books. It was about believing in someone before they believed in themselves. I still taught kids at the market in the evenings, only now I brought real notebooks and flashcards. Parents started noticing. My son knows how to spell his name now. She wrote me a note, first time ever. B would chuckle and say, "You're doing magic, Nora." "It's not magic," I'd reply. "It's education." In 1980, I was offered an internship at Jefferson Street Public School in a low-income neighborhood near the river. 30 students, 2 broken heaters, desks with initials carved into them, but to me, it was a palace. I walked in and said, "Good morning, class. My name is Miss Nora, and I believe in you." Some stared, some scoffed, some didn't even lift their heads. But by winter, 27 out of 30 could read and write their names. By spring, we were reading Charlotte's Web together. At year's end, the principal called me in. "You've got something," he said. "We'd like to keep you on." In December 1980, at age 28, I stood on a university stage in a second-hand blue dress and received my diploma, Bachelor of Education, cum laude. My parents cried. B brought a pie. The market kids made me a crayon-covered card that read, "Miss Nora, thank you for helping us see words." I stood at the microphone and said, "It's never too late to become who you were meant to be." For the first time in my adult life, I felt whole. I had work that mattered, friends who believed in me, a purpose that made waking up feel light again. The past still hurt, but it no longer controlled the road ahead. It was March 1982 when the past knocked quiet but heavy. I had just wrapped up math drills when the school principal walked into my classroom. "Nora, someone's asking for you at the front office. Urgently." Waiting there was a thin, pale woman in a hospital headscarf. Her eyes were tired, her hands shaking. I didn't recognize her at first. "I'm Lillian Price," she said, "Daniel's sister." The air left my lungs. "I need your help." "It's about my grandson, Daniel's son with Janice." My knees nearly buckled. Lillian explained Janice had been pregnant when she died. The boy Eli was 4 now. Lillian had raised him alone, but was terminally ill. "The doctors say I've got 6 months, maybe less." "Why me?" I whispered. "You're still his next of kin. You were Daniel's wife. I know what he did, and I don't expect forgiveness. But the boy, he's innocent. He has no one else." I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I asked for a day. That night, I walked along the river in silence. How could I take in the child of the man who nearly destroyed me, of the woman who betrayed me? But I thought about the cycle, about how stories pass from one generation to the next like broken heirlooms. If I didn't stop it, who would? The next morning, I met Eli. He had Daniel's hair, Janice's nose, big dark eyes that darted around the room like they didn't trust anything. "Who's that lady?" he asked Lillian. "She's your friend, Miss Nora." He waved once, hesitant. "Do you like parks?" That's how he won me. "I do," I said. "There's a nice one near my apartment." Lillian cried when I said I'd take him. "Thank you. I didn't know who else to ask." I brought him home that weekend. My parents lit up like Christmas trees. My mother baked a peach pie. My father brought out his old toy train set. That night, I watched Eli sleep on the pull-out couch, his small frame rising and falling with soft breaths. I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel anger. I felt chosen. Raising Eli wasn't easy. He asked for Lillian every night. He had nightmares. He cried over nothing. He wet the bed for weeks. But I understood trauma doesn't always look like bruises. Sometimes it hides in silence and spilled cereal. I told him his parents were in heaven, and they asked me to take care of him. It wasn't the full truth, but it was the gentlest version I could offer a 4-year-old. In July 1982, I adopted him legally. In October, his name changed to Eli Ellison, my son. As a single teacher raising a traumatized child, I often felt like I was sprinting on empty. Money was tight. I tutored on weekends. I worked nights writing lesson plans by candlelight during power outages. But every sacrifice was worth it. Eli thrived. He painted constantly swirls of color that B said looked like healing. When I got promoted to educational coordinator in 1984, he hugged me and asked, "Does this mean you're the boss now?" I laughed. "No, sweetheart. It means I help other teachers help kids just like I help you." That summer, we moved into a little house in Mount Auburn. I planted tomatoes and daisies like my mama used to. For the first time, it felt like I belonged somewhere again. In 1985, I was 33 and had long given up on romantic love, until Michael Dorsey appeared. He was a fellow educator and algebra teacher from Nashville who transferred to our district. Tall, thoughtful kind in a way that felt steady. No grand gestures, just small kindnesses that stacked over time like bricks. He brought me coffee after long meetings, covered for me when Eli got sick, walked with us to the bus stop on snowy mornings. When Eli had his appendix removed, Michael sat with me in the waiting room the whole time. "You don't have to stay," I whispered. "I know," he said, "but I want to." After the surgery, Eli, still groggy, muttered, "Are you my mom's friend?" Michael smiled. "I hope so." It was the gentlest beginning of anything I'd ever known. Over the next 2 years, friendship turned into dinners. Dinners turned into hand-holding. Hand-holding turned into hope. I told Michael everything: the trauma, the marriage, the beating, the murder, the boy I was raising. He didn't flinch. He just listened the way B did that day in the park. In 1987, at a small restaurant near the waterfront, he proposed. Not with a ring, but with a question. "Can we build a family together?" Eli, now 9, grinned. "Will you be my dad?" "If your mom agrees," Michael said. I said yes. We married the following spring. A quiet ceremony in the park where I first met B. My father walked me down the aisle again, his grip strong. Eli stood as ring bearer, proud as ever. Michael moved into our Mount Auburn home and folded into our life like he'd always been there. A few weeks later, while playing soccer in the yard, Eli shouted, "Dad, look," and ran to Michael. He'd never called anyone that before, not even by mistake. Michael knelt down and hugged him without saying a word. In 1988, I was named principal of Maple Grove Elementary, a struggling school on the edge of town. The dropout rate was high. Parent involvement was low. Teachers were burnt out. Michael looked at me and said, "If anyone can turn that place around, it's you." I took the job. In 5 years, we reduced absenteeism by half-added a student garden, opened a family library, and raised literacy scores by 40%. People ask, "How did you do it?" And I'd answer honestly to gather teachers, students, families. Then, at age 38, I got news I never expected. I was pregnant. In 1990, just a year after becoming principal of Maple Grove Elementary, I gave birth to a baby girl. I was 38, thought motherhood was behind me, but life had other plans. We named her Grace. Her arrival was quick, nearly painless. She came into the world with a full head of dark curls and lungs that refused to be ignored. Michael cried when he first held her. Eli, now 13, stared at her in wonder. "Will you still love me as much?" he asked one night. "Always," I said. "You're my first miracle. She's just the second." Eli adored his little sister. He drew her bedtime stories, read to her, learned how to heat bottles, and when she cried, he'd whisper, "It's okay. I got you." In 1992, when Eli was 15, I found him in the basement with newspaper clippings spread across the floor. "Is it true?" he asked. "Did my dad really kill someone?" My heart stopped. He had found everything: the trial reports, the articles, the photos. I sat him down and told him the truth about Daniel, about Janice, about the day I found them, about the violence, the escape, the call from his aunt, about choosing him when I could have turned away. "I'm the son of a monster," he whispered. "No," I said, my voice steady. "You're the son of love. You were raised with care, not cruelty. You carry none of his darkness." He cried in my arms for a long time. Later that night, Michael took him outside, laid a blanket under the stars, and said, "I'd be proud to give you my name if you want it." The following spring, Eli Ellison became Eli Dorsey. He earned a full scholarship to study architecture. Grace grew into a bold, curious girl who questioned everything. In 1995, I was honored as Ohio Educator of the Year. At the ceremony, I looked out into the crowd, Michael Eli in his suit, Grace in a little yellow dress, and said, "Sometimes the most important lessons aren't found in books. They're found in what we overcome, in who we choose to become." In the 2000s, Eli opened his own design firm. Grace decided she wanted to become a pediatric nurse. I continued working at Maple Grove until 2009, when I finally retired at age 57 after 21 years as principal. Michael threw me a surprise party. Eli brought his wife Nina, a watercolor artist with a soft smile. Grace baked the cake herself. "It's not pretty," she warned, "but it's ours." It was perfect. Then in 2011, life tested us again. Breast cancer, stage 2, chemo, surgery, radiation. I lost my hair, lost my strength, but I never lost their hands holding mine. Michael shaved his head in solidarity. Grace drove me to every appointment. Eli turned our backyard into a healing garden with a fountain and forget-me-nots. By spring of the next year, I was in remission. "I always knew you were stronger than this," Michael whispered. In 2013, I returned to Elkmont for the first time in nearly 40 years. The town had changed, new stores, cleaner sidewalks, but the hills still stood. The house I grew up in was now a florist shop. The old schoolhouse had fresh paint. I visited the cemetery. I left flowers for Daniel's parents, not for him, but for them. They were kind. I held no bitterness for the ones who had only offered me warmth. Then I visited the church where I once said I do. I stood at the altar where it all began. There were no ghosts, just silence and a strange sense of forgiveness I hadn't expected. Back in Cincinnati, life moved gently. My father passed in 2015, my mother 8 months later. We turned their apartment into a community reading room filled with donated books and old rocking chairs. We named it Hazel's Corner in her honor. In 2017, Grace married Jordan Fields, a soft-spoken paramedic who grounded her fire. In 2018, Eli and Nina welcomed their first daughter, Lena, and 2 years later, another girl, Hope. Hope was always part of this family, Eli told me. Now she has a name. During the pandemic, we survived through video calls, baking recipes over Zoom, and planting vegetables in the backyard. Life slowed down, but our bond didn't. Now I'm 69. My hands are wrinkled. My back aches some mornings, but my heart is light. I think often of who I was. A girl in the coal dust, a woman in hiding, a wife who almost didn't survive, a mother by choice, a teacher by passion, a woman who lived. If you're listening now and you're hurting, please hear this. You are not what happened to you. You are who you choose to become. Family isn't just blood, it's who shows up. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's setting yourself free. And healing takes time, but it comes, sometimes in the most unexpected way. Thank you for letting me share my story. With love, Nora Ellison Dorsey, mother, grandmother, survivor, and still here. At 69, my hands tell the truth before my mouth does. They're worn now, creased by chalk dust, dishwater hospital beds, baby bottles, and prayer. Once they trembled in fear. Now they steady high school diplomas, stir soup, hold grandchildren close, bury flowers, not pain. Each scar on my body, each wrinkle on my skin is a sentence in the story of survival. I used to think strength looked like silence, endurance, staying put. Now I know true strength is leaving when your soul is dying. True strength is starting again. I've learned that the past doesn't disappear, it reshapes you. I will always carry the echoes of what Daniel did, but they no longer define my days. They do not write my future because I rewrote it myself. With the help of a father who believed I still had life left in me. With a stranger who handed me funnel cake and said, "You're carrying too much." With a boy who asked, "Can I stay with you?" And with a man who never raised his voice but lifted my heart. Forgiveness, especially for yourself, isn't one moment. It's a daily decision not to pick up what you already laid down. Some people say family is blood. I don't agree. Family is who stays, who sees you in your worst moments and says, "Let's get up together." Family is who helps you become the version of yourself you never thought possible. To whoever's listening, if you're walking through the ashes, if your chest feels like it holds 1,000 bricks, if your past has teeth, please know this: you are not broken. You are breaking open. And there's light waiting on the other side. You don't need to be perfect to start again. You just need to be willing. And if no one's ever told you, I believe in you. Thank you for letting me share my story and for giving me the gift of being heard. With all the love I have, Nora Ellison Dorsey, wife, teacher, mother, grandmother, and proof that love always finds a way